let's talk about the new book. Not out yet. It's not out till next
Mm.
Tuesday by journalist Jake Tapper.
I think this is like one of those deals where just before you say, like when someone does something and and on the news they say we're not going to say his name because they don't want to
Yeah.
create. I think
Yeah.
we can refer to it as a book without talking about the
Okay.
authors.
All right. It's a
They
book
don't
by
deserve
two.
to profit off
It's a
this.
book by two people. It's doing very well on Amazon, but I still question its all right. It's commercial prospects. So there's a number of levels we could talk about this book on. We talk about what's in the book. We could talk about the media coverage of the book. We could talk about the media's and the author's failure to be honest about their role in the cover-up. And we could talk about politicians. So we're going to try to do them all. First, the New York Times has the book. I have the book. A bunch of people have the book, even though it's an embargoed book that's not out till next week. The New York Times read the book and they did one of those. Here are the 6 pieces of news in the book. Okay. But here's what they said after reading the book and combing it for news. Okay. Here are the 6 takeaways. Put up the pull quote. Okay. The book does not contain any astonishing revelation that changes the broad perceptions of Mr. Biden was fit to serve. Instead, it's a collection of smaller occurrences and observations reflecting his decline. The authors write about a cover-up, though their book shows a Biden inner circle that spends more time sticking its collective head in the sand, blah, blah, blah. Again, this is exactly right from my knowledge of the book. I haven't finished it, but I've read a lot of it. They talk about a cover-up, but there's no reporting in this book. If there were, you'd know about it. That says, oh, here's the people who engaged in the cover-up and here's how they do it. It's all anonymous quotes making anonymous allegations about unnamed people. Now, despite the fact that there's no book and no news in this book, here's how the New York Post covered it this morning. This is number, where is that? Number 109. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 stories. Okay. I read all 6 stories. There's no news in any of them. All of them end or say in the body of the story, the book goes on sale next week. It's as if Risa Heller, the publicist who's very skillful, hired by the authors, somehow got the New York Post to write 6 stories, even though there's no news in the book. So my first question, Dan, as a student of news, Joe Biden and the New York Post, how does a book with the New York Times correctly says has no news in it get 6 New York Post stories?
Well, I think you have to separate. There's no news to people who consume this and follow this kind of for a living.
There's no news of interest to someone in Queens. There's none. Read all 6 stories. Name the thing in those 6 stories that people in Queens would find interesting?
That the president could not recognize George Clooney at an event. Mark, it's celebrity.
If you're a viewer of Fox News or Newsmax or a reader of Twitter, it comes as no surprise to you that he couldn't recognize George Clooney.
That is so they average 3.5 million a night out of a population of 350 million. So it's
if you're interested in Joe Biden's failure to recognize George Clooney, you're one of those 3 million people.
But I think to the average person on the street. Okay. When I walk down,
let me ask you a different way. Let me ask you a different way. Do you think the New York Post wrote 6 stories organically? They read the book and they said, "Oh my God, this deserves 6 stories." No way. There's no way. There's no way the New York Post read the book and said, "This is so explosively filled with news. We can't just write 1 story about it or 2. We must write 6 separate stories." Find the last book they wrote 6 stories about. Probably had some news in it. By the New York Times account, the book has no news in it, and the New York Post wrote 6 stories, and I can tell you, I don't know why, but it did not happen organically. Sean.
Oh, sure, of course.
I'm just trying to figure out, I will give credit to Risa Heller. I mean,
yeah, totally.
She's very good at what she does.
Yeah.
I mean, I actually, normally she is someone that you call when you're in trouble. So this just proves her prowess on the other end, which is how do you promote as well. So congratulations to Risa and her team. But I mean, to me, that speaks to her relationships with the New York Post. And I will say that I agree with Dan to some extent. The Clooney anecdote, to me was more revealing, though, that if it was this pervasive, right? The idea that like the way that they describe his interaction with Clooney says to me that this actually is a greater indictment on the media and everybody else. That like the idea that if it's that bad that you literally don't know who George Clooney is and he's hosting the fundraiser for you, i.e. in your briefing, and supposedly, according to Clooney, you've known the guy for 20 years, regardless of your personal relationship, he's just that famous, that you don't recognize him. That says to me that's a greater indictment on how pervasive this decline was and how the folks that are especially writing this book and their colleagues were part of that. Because if he doesn't recognize George Clooney, who's hosting a fundraiser at the fundraiser he's being hosted at, that you've read a briefing card about, then you can't then say that, well, gosh, we didn't know this, because that's what they're trying to make the argument of.
But you're wrong about this example, Sean. I say respectfully, because they didn't know about the Clooney story till after the election, right? But they did know this.
They might not have. No. Okay, fair enough.
But that's an indictment of Clooney, who now is being cast as a hero for speaking out. But it's an indictment of everyone.
My time, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead. Okay, go ahead.
Here's my point, though. If it's that, what I'm saying to you about the Clooney story is that if it is that blatant, that Clooney had that experience, then the idea that there weren't more signs around.
Correct. So let me get to that.
But by the way, and then I will say this on the New York Times, part of why they're saying there's no news is because they didn't cover it, and they have to therefore admit their complicity in this.
There's no news in the book, so that's not the reason, even though they should admit their complicity. I agree the Clooney story is the sexiest, and I could see one New York Post story about Clooney, not 6 stories about all different things in the book. Now, the book has no news in it. They don't expose the cover-up. They don't name names. They also don't acknowledge the press's failure to press the administration in real time about this. Not just as a candidate, he was commander-in-chief and president of the United States. That was a delicious video experience. I think you'll agree. Now, what you need to do in return for getting to enjoy that is hit the subscribe button, be part of the two-way community, never miss a thing.